What does it mean to innovate in the practice of law? Like, what are the key objectives? And to me, it was ultimately making more money. And you do that through materially enhancing what clients are getting, the client service and the output to the client.
Welcome to Between the Briefs, a podcast by Steno. We're here to bring you practical tips, expert insights, and real conversations about the pretrial process, court reporting, and the legal technology shaping the future of litigation. I'm your host, Adrian.
And I'm your host, Joe Stevens. Whether you're an attorney, paralegal, or just curious about how technology is changing the legal industry, we've got something for you. Each episode will break down complex topics, share behind-the-scenes intel, and talk to the people leading innovation in and out of the courtroom. So grab a coffee and let's get into what's happening between the briefs.
Hello and welcome to Between the Briefs, brought to you by Steno. We're your hosts. My name is Adrian.
And I'm your co-host, Joe Stevens.
And in this episode, we're thrilled to welcome Katie DeBord, Vice President of Product Strategy at Disco. Katie brings over a decade of experience in corporate law and litigation, along with a strong passion for legal innovation and technology. In her current role, she's helping to drive the transformation of the legal industry by leveraging AI-powered solutions to streamline litigation processes and improve efficiency for law firms and corporations.
Before joining Disco, Katie held leadership roles at Bryan Cave Leighton Paisner, where she spearheaded innovation efforts in complex commercial litigation. Her career has been at the forefront of the intersection between law and technology, making her a unique voice in the industry.
Katie, welcome to the show. It's fantastic to have you with us here today. How are you?
I'm great. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, as the intro mentioned, you have had a very diverse career and you have both a foot in the legal technology space and also in law in general. Can you tell us more about how it all began for you?
Sure. And it's actually not to flash my age, but I'm now well over 2 decades, which is a little scary. When I heard that, I was like, how many years has it been? But yeah, I started my career, and this is something that people who know me know. I started my career at the CIA actually, right after law school, and that's a full other story and podcast. It was really the result of a bet that I made with some friends on the Ozarks after finals my sophomore year of college. But I started my career off at the CIA. I was an intelligence analyst, and did that work for about 5 years. And then, really from that work felt like I wanted to go to law school. And there's lots of reasons for that. But I think that the biggest reason was I saw how much power the law had, in people's lives. And I saw how much I didn't know, both, US law and international law and things like that. And so I was really curious about it. So I went to law school, and I went to law school in DC. And my first summer, I worked for in-house for the CIA in their legal office, which has lots of funny stories managing defectors because they still exist. And yes, they drink a lot of vodka. So there's many stories about that. But yeah, and then my second summer, I went to Kirkland and Ellis in DC, and that is where I was first exposed to litigation. I mean, I think as with a lot of law students, at least back in that day, I had no idea what kind of law I wanted to practice, and sort of found myself gravitating towards the litigators. And I'm not one of those people you often hear of, the recovering litigator, people who hated litigation. I absolutely loved it. And I went to Kirkland right after law school, and started litigating. One of my very first cases was that I worked on, obviously, to lead, was Netscape and AOL's civil antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft. And, talk about not only a fascinating case. I mean, this is back in 2002 timeframe. So, e-discovery wasn't a term, but the documents at issue were mostly electronic. Can we just pause for just a second so I can let my dog out? I'm so sorry. I'll be right back. So, uh, the one of my early cases was the Netscape and AOL antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft, and e-discovery wasn't a term. We were still collecting, or at least lawyers were still collecting hard copy documents. But that case, of course, required the collection of a lot of electronic documents, and whether it be from old school emails, AOL, AIM, instant chat, whatever, source code, things like that. So it's funny to kind of look back at that early side. And I litigated from there. Ultimately moved to Denver, became partner in 2008, and continued litigating until about 2015. And it was in the 2014, 2015 time period where I started to see kind of the future, the modernization of law and the implications of data. The kinds of data that I was dealing with when I was practicing isn't even close to what we're dealing with now. And um and how are we as litigators going to find the story? We talk about the theory of the case and things like that. And so um I I started to raise these conversations with our chair of the firm at the time. Long story short, the firm executed a new strategic plan. Innovation was one of the three pillars, and they asked me if I might want to lead that pillar and grow out that group. And so I think my friends, across the industry and I have compared notes. I think I was the very first law firm chief innovation officer. Um, and it was a terrifying title to take over. That in itself is, um, uh, a scary thing to think about, like changing fundamentally what you've worked your entire life to do, and then change it for a different role altogether. But I ended up being in that role for 7 years and leading a team of about 40 people, across, really, both domestically and in the UK. And that's really how it all, in a nutshell, came about.
That's amazing. Katie, so many questions before we get into sort of maybe what you're doing now and really diving into that. I am so curious. What does in-house counsel at CIA, what do they do?
Okay, so they do everything from what I would call the boring stuff, which is when the crazy people sue the CIA and say they've planted an implant in my teeth, which they do, or they did at least when I was there.
They sued them, or the CIA was implanting things in people's teeth?
No. Sorry. They sued the CIA.
Yeah. I was like, wow, this is going to be breaking news. What an admission.
That's your spicy lead right there. Yeah, so yeah, you had crazy people suing the CIA all the time. You certainly, they dealt with things every kind of corporation deals with, right? Government contracts, HR issues, things like that, employment, termination type issues. But then they also do work with the ops people and various apparatuses of the intelligence community, to advise on what's legal, what's not legal, what needs certain levels of approval, things like that. So it really spans, or at least, again, my knowledge of this is from 2001 or 2000, actually. Year 2000 was when I was in-house. But it was, it's a really, at least it was just a really great group of people and smart people, all across the board.
That is incredible. And I'm curious, you mentioned that it all began in college or high school. Tell me more about that. What is this bet and how does it lead to you joining the CIA?
Again, long story made short. Um, I was adopted. I was adopted when I was a baby. My parents were told, don't come up with a name, don't create a room, don't do anything because you don't know if you're going to get a baby or not. And they waited 8 years for me, and they followed the advice of people. So they got a call one day, "We have a baby that, could potentially be yours." And, they picked me up, and they called me 007 for the first 2 weeks of my life or of my life with them as they were, coming up with a name. And so, I have all these letters back and forth between my parents and my grandparents reporting on 007 and how 007's doing and things like that. So with that story, I was always really interested in what, I guess, like, it just was cool to me, the whole spy thing was cool to me. I didn't have any clue what it actually entailed, and I had no clue what the CIA actually did. But my friends and I were celebrating the in the finals, and you can assume lots of beer was involved. And we were watching In the Line of Fire, which is not about the CIA, it's about the Secret Service. But I had an internship lined up in DC to intern for Colorado Senator at the time, Senator Brown. And I made some nonsense remark about, by the end of the summer, I'm going to have a job at the CIA. And so it turned into a bet. And they said, "Okay, if you actually get a job at the CIA, we'll pay for all the kegs of beer for your 21st birthday," which was the following February. And, again, very long story short, I ended up getting the job, and I found out I got the job 2 days before my birthday. So I thought it was absolutely hilarious when my friends actually had to buy all of my beer for my birthday.
It's amazing, right? When you sort of tell your story only with the benefit of hindsight. And on one level, it
Yeah,
sounds like very thoughtful. And then from here, I went here. And then on another level,
yeah,
it has that actual story to it.
yeah, and
Completely right,
randomness to it.
exactly.
And so
Katie, is there anything, I mean, I'm always intrigued by the non-legal necessarily or non-traditionally legal. I'm a lawyer myself, and I've spent a lot of time doing other things, but I'm
yeah,
always pulling those experiences into my practice now in
yeah,
different ways. What is it that you took positively and negatively from your time at the CIA? Like what things did it teach
yeah.
you on both sides of it?
I had, as I said, I mean, my colleagues there were, some of the best humans I've ever met in my life and smartest. And I had a great boss. And, early on, I mean, I was young. I don't even think I'd turned, no, I was 21 when I started at the CIA. And so you could have, I could have had a boss who said, "Stay in your lane, know when to speak up, know when not to speak up." But, she really encouraged me to speak up when I saw things that didn't make sense. And one of the first professional awards I got, was at the CIA, and it was because, um, we were there was an issue that was receiving international and very close attention by the president, things like that. And, I didn't think it made sense how, internally we were sharing information, and then also how we were collectively kind of coming to decisions about what to make out of that information. And it was because we were organized by geography instead of having like a cross-functional, team. That's as much as I can say, but it's kind of this the analogy is absolutely the same in law where, if you only have a group of lawyers who don't bring in a cross-functional team of data analysts and technologists and process engineers, you're not gonna have as good of a result, right? It's the same analogy. And so I proposed a different way to organize this particular, group, or I had an idea, and she said, "Propose it to George Tenet," who was the director of the CIA at the time. And they actually, reorged, the issue group as a result. And so I think one of the early things it taught me was, to if you see something that doesn't make sense, it sometimes being more junior even gives you leverage because you're not looking at it like, "Oh, it's always been done that way." but don't assume, you shouldn't assume that it's being done that way for a good reason. You should just assume it's been done that way because no one suggested a different way to do it. And so I think for sure it gave me courage in that regard. And then I also think, you know, work at the CIA is hard. It's complex. It's putting a lot of different data points together to tell a story or to predict what's happening. And that's the same as law. And, it really taught me hard work and complex work is very, very rewarding. And putting pieces together is one of my skill sets. And and then I think the final thing is just the value of really smart people around you. That's just to me has always been um uh table stakes for anywhere I go is to know that there will always be smart, interesting, creative people around me who will lift everybody up.
It makes all the difference, and those are some very, incredible lessons learned. And I'm very curious as to your title change when you became partner, right? You went from partner to then chief innovation officer, which is a big one, especially if you were, even 5 years back, because technology has moved so fast. Even if you were, just 5 years back, changing to that title is a big move. So seeing how when the title change happened, you felt like you were the only one with that title, probably in the US. What
Well,
were
and
some of
who
the
knew what it
lessons?
meant? I mean, people still don't know what it
Right.
means.
Exactly.
So,
So I'm curious, what are some findings that you realized in that position? And when you finally got the hand of it, of like, okay, if I'm trying to innovate, here's what I'm gonna do. What did you look out for and accomplish?
I think the first thing is just even knowing where to start. With a especially in that early time when there hadn't been people who had done this role before me, uh there was a precedent, and so what does it mean to innovate in the practice of law? Like what are the key objectives? And to me it was and this is, it's business, right? It's ultimately making more money. And you do that through materially enhancing what clients are getting. The client service and the output to the client. And if you kind of take it from that basic point, you look at, okay, where are the places, right now sitting here today that we could materially enhance and differentiate, what we're doing from other large law firms and what our clients um, not getting today that they could be getting through leveraging, those cross-functional resources of technology and people who are specialists in other areas besides law. And thinking about what you can do with that that's really different. I, I I had a partner who I worked with for a long time who would use the term break the spine, like let's break the spine of this argument or how we're looking at it. And I love that because it means really looking at something completely differently than and challenging yourself to do that. Sort of like post-impressionistic Picasso type, let's take all the pieces and resort them and see what we get out of it.
Katie, I love the description there, and in your earlier answer too about being junior and having new eyes on something and breaking the spine the way you just described that. I always say that too to my students. Like sometimes the best eyes to see a case are through the eyes of a juror. Like don't think about this in the complex legal way because your audience is going to be thinking about it more like you. But on the innovation front, is it easier to innovate inside a law firm or inside the CIA?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. No one's ever asked me that question. I would say at least the CIA I worked for again, and I don't know one way or the other, but so we'll talk about the CIA back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Um, I would say the CIA.
Why is that? What is it everything that you'd think? Like lawyers tend to be sort of much more risk averse, but I would think that that was true. And I don't know. I mean, tell me, flesh that out more.
Yeah, I actually think that's part of it is that, you know, lawyers are inherently trained to look for where failures might exist. So is, the intelligence apparatus and the military apparatus of our government. Um, but I think in the practice of law, and I'm gonna flesh this out because I have not thought about this, but I still stand by my answer. It's the CIA. I think in the practice of law, micro failures are have much more of a significant impact or potentially significant impact. I mean, down to having a typo in your brief. I used to say to my associates, that reflects on us in so many ways that you might not even think about, right? The client will worry that we're not as detail oriented as we need to be to deal with the complexity of this case. The opposing counsel, will think that, we're weaker, right? And when in litigation, it's, you know, king of the mountain, battle game. And I also think the CIA attracts people who are sort of at the extreme edge of curious and risk tolerant, to be honest with you. Like, you have people who are there because they like to take risks in one way or the other. Um and lawyers don't like to take risks necessarily. And again, some of it is because of the ego part where it could just look badly for them, or it could be, not, malpractice, whatever. CIA, of course, you screw up, intelligence, and then you have 9/11, right? So those are big risks too. But I do think it's probably the people and the people who the two industries attract.
You've had very diverse expertise, right? From chief innovation officer, working at the CIA. How do you feel that has led to now going into the legal tech world and being vice president of product strategy? How have those lessons that you've learned kind of driven the work you do now at Disco?
I think one of it is, it's sort of, Joe, what you said, like, take a step back, like, as if you're a juror, right? Stop getting so in the weeds, see the forest through the trees sort of thing, where, um, what are we really trying to do? At the CIA, what are we really trying to accomplish? What are we trying to accomplish when we're litigating? And it's the same as at a tech company, especially one like Disco, where, um, they are inherently innovative. Their business model is partly based on their rapid innovation, right? And but it's what are we ultimately trying to accomplish? And are we focusing on the things that enable that ultimate accomplishment, right? Are we changing, in my mind, what we're trying to do is ultimately is bring tech in as a sidecar to litigators, right? And not it's so in a way that actually changes, it enhances how they can strategize the case, how they can, h- you know how it gets them, on the front foot in those king of the mountain battles, how it helps them tell their story better, more creatively, how it helps them make legal arguments in a different way that they may have come up with eventually, but tech accelerates, because I do think technology, it enhances creativity. I fundamentally believe that. And so, I really do think it's that, let's make sure we're keeping perspective. And part of that perspective at a legal tech company is, the risks that lawyers face every day, the stress they face every day, the implications of screwing something up, the implications you know, um, of not delivering in the way that the lawyers rightly expect, their technology to deliver. The implications of the technology being terrible for the lawyers to use, right? What happens ultimately if the lawyers don't want to engage in the technology? And to me, all of those are kind of the big questions that feed down and feed into kind of the more micro strategy.
So how do you then advise or engage with the tech averse or more tech hesitant practitioner? I mean, what are you saying? What are you doing? How are you encouraging? How are you sort of positioning them to really stare at that innovation in the eye and be okay with it, be comfortable with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we're getting to the point where we were 10 years ago when I started, when I rolled into my innovation function, where more lawyers than not understand inherently how technology should be enhancing their practice and their client outcomes and client output, right? Or output for their clients. And they understand it in a better way because they use technology, more and more in their own lives. So they can start to see parallels, and lawyers are good at seeing parallels between things. And so what I would say first is for those laggards, and this is going to sound kind of, I don't know, like crude, but I don't really care about spending a ton of time convincing the laggards to come along because there's so many people who are along or are wanting to come along. Those are the people that I think are really, the people to focus on. But even those people, who are not the laggards, who are forward thinking, who inherently understand that technology should fundamentally change the way or improve the way they're practicing the law, it's helping them understand why it's safe, and I would say that's the first thing, is helping them understand, what should it look like to be working with a technology partner? What should you expect to get out of the relationship? What kind of questions should you be asking? So that you're not running into problems, and having to explain to the client and the court, why you did something, why you did what you did. And so I think a lot of the conversations, Joe, right now center around that, around, um, okay, I hear all this stuff about Gen AI. I vaguely have a sense of how I use Gen AI in my personal sphere, and I can vaguely analogize how I might use that in my professional sphere. Tell me more about what that might look like, and then tell me why I should feel okay with it and why my clients should feel okay with it. And those are really the conversations that are happening right now.
That is very key. And, I think a lot of what you just mentioned are things that any chief innovation officer would look for if they were in a law firm, right? And in my personal opinion, I think every law firm needs one because AI and the speed of legal technology is moving fast. For any type of attorney who would be interested in really fulfilling that position for their law firm, what should they do to maybe one, prove a use case to have the position open, or two, move into that position if it's already open?
I don't necessarily know if I agree that every law firm should have one. And the reason why I'm saying that is I think lawyers can be prone to delegating, their curiosity about technology, their education about technology to a group of people because there's only so many hours in the day and anything they can delegate, they will. And I guess one of the things that I also talk to clients and prospective clients about really is to learn about technology the way you learn about your clients' industries. Lawyers are constantly learning about new things and new industries. So spend the time learning it. And then the question becomes, is your law firm a model where you need someone to be, the quarterback of it? And you need really a team to be the quarterback of it, meaning, um, have you, is there maybe a certain area of law that you want to be differentiated in 5 years? And is there a material thing technology could do to um, enable that differentiation? Or, let's say that law firms, as they keep merging and expanding and they have international clients, um, just are finding themselves not able to really provide the service they know their clients should get because of that volume of data that humans simply cannot process themselves, and they know they could be providing better risk mitigation advice to their clients, or they know they could be, doing kind of lower value work at a cheaper rate. They know that they're maybe losing um, attorneys because they're not tech forward, which you hear about, or at least I hear about all the time. The younger attorneys are like, this law firm is literally stuck in like the DOS era. I need to get out because I can't give my clients the service that they're going to be expecting. Um, I think that's when you bring in um, somebody to quarterback it. But I do really think it is something where if it's a large law firm, it probably makes sense, or something that, some role that centralizes, shall we say, um, you know, the efforts so that you make sure, somebody's accountable, right? That the efforts are coordinated, that you have data and statistics that you can look at the end of the year and say, how did we do against our strategy? Are we actually executing against our strategy? That's where I think it would be helpful to have that kind of team. There's some conversation right now as to, what are the new roles looking like? Do we have a chief data scientist, in a law firm, whatever it is, as to, and it really is kind of dependent on what the law firm's strategy is. And I'm not saying here to say that law firms are good at developing or executing on strategy. It's a whole other subject.
And I'm trying to like really wrap my head around in the economics of it, because I agree with what you're saying, right? Like at the end of the day, it's a business, and the business is obviously making money, and then making money, as you said earlier, delivering a high quality product to your client, et cetera, et cetera. All of that I agree with. And then what you just said too is also true. Like, okay, can I do it better with sort of more actively using the technology that's out there for me to sort of deliver a better product with? Okay, but then the on steroids sort of technology in the room is the AI, because it seems to me that there's a number of different ways of delivering that value to clients at the highest level, depending on the size of your firm and what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. But at the very top with your big firms, like it is crystal clear that you can do a better job at a lower rate if you're using AI the right way.
Yes.
Like in other words, the delivering of the higher quality product by using the best technology is undercutting the returns that you're getting, it seems.
Yeah.
Am I right
Yeah.
about like where does that take us?
I mean, it's sort of the conundrum of big law in the billable hours model, right? Where I think that's what you're asking, Joe, is like, ultimately, are you cutting into your billable hours by using technology? I mean, and that's always been a question, right? Like law firms are like, I mean, in this, I would say most law firms still don't think this way, and if they do, then clients should run away from them. But I think law firms absolutely in the beginning were like, well, why would we do this if this means less billable hours, right? And therefore less revenue. Um, and I think, a couple of things have happened. One is that clients are just far better informed. When I started in my role in innovation, legal ops was just becoming a thing, right? It was a fairly nascent group of people. the legal ops community, and now you have this focus in law departments on people who are looking at, their legal service providers or vendors. Law firms are vendors, right? As much as they don't like to acknowledge that. Um, but you know, and saying, are you doing the best work that you can be doing for us at the best price? And so if you're not, as a law firm, meeting those customer expectations, you're opening yourself up to other law firms coming in and doing it better than you are. And again, I also think it really is, especially as you see younger and younger people now being the general counsels, right? Being the clients and having a different view of technology, and a different expectation of, what work product, should look like. Like, what should be involved in when we're developing our strategy? Should it just be the narrow case before us, or should we be looking at, in general, how, our client, this group of companies, does business across the globe? And so and that's just an example of I think how clients are going to be saying, wait a minute, if you're still basically typing on a typewriter, which is in my mind the equivalent of not leveraging AI in your legal practice, why should I be paying you all this money? There's certain cases and certain clients where at the end of the day, that's not going to matter. I truly believe there are certain cases and clients where they're going to hire, their favorite lawyers, and they do not care at all whether, those lawyers are leveraging technology. But even that is getting compressed, because it's not as if, I mean, you see the top 10 am laws, right? And the magic circle in the UK leveraging technology like crazy. And so even the best of the best, for the most complex of the cases, they're leveraging technology in different ways. And so I think even with those, but the company huge cases, those clients have a different expectation. And so basically it becomes a question of billable hour or no client at all. And then, of course, it becomes a question of, do we ever change the billable hour model, which, you know,
So you mentioned leveraging technology. I'm curious, how is Disco currently leveraging AI?
Disco, I mean, one of the reasons why I came to Disco is that it is, in my view, the most um, innovative litigation technology company out there. It has been working on Gen AI far longer than the other major litigation technologies out there. We've had an AI lab in place since its inception. It was, developed with the eye towards, being rapidly innovative and anticipating technologies like Gen AI, coming onto the horizon. And so, the first thing is that our technology is, you know, established. It's as mature as it can be for Gen AI. We leverage different LLMs depending on what, we're trying to achieve. We're constantly studying the LLMs, and what's coming out, what's new, what's better, what's faster, what's cheaper. And and really how we're using it in our products is, I would say, in two ways. One is for efficiencies, which technology has always, that's sort of the standard, thing that you always think about with technology is, oh, it creates efficiencies, right? And we have things like a generative AI auto review feature that reviews, you know, tens of thousands of documents an hour and is more reliable than humans. And it has a better recall and precision rate than human review. Um, and that's tested by our clients too. I mean, it's a fabulous technology. Um, but then there's also what I would say, there's efficiency, and then there's also, and I don't necessarily know if I have a good word for it, but, strategy enhancer. I don't really know what the right word is for it, but um, technology tools that really enhance how you're strategizing the case from the very beginning. So, we have generative AI that allows you to query, hundreds of thousands of documents, and and do the early risk assessments based on what those documents are showing and what witnesses are involved. We can immediately find out, you know, um, uh, who worked on X contract, who negotiated X contract, or, what did Katie and Joe talk about in relation to, this, software license agreement or whatever it is. So you can query things, based on people, based on topic, but then also really getting a sense fast um, as to, I would say, themes that are in the documents, right? So themes of who was working together, who maybe somebody came in at the last minute of a negotiating hour, and that it's an outlier, right? It's not something it would be something that you'd find after human review, but something that you can find really quickly, with the technology. Um, Analogies. I love using Gen AI for analogies. So, looking at, okay, what are other, um contract clauses that have existed within the company that are similar to this contract clause? Or, you know, what are the reasons why we implemented this policy, this employment policy, or whatever it is, and trying to look at what the computer comes up with, to to do again what humans would do, but do it a lot faster. And then what the humans can do is, check it. Like, we have, full ability to check where each answer is coming from and actually go to the source documents, but then augment what they're doing. Or themes and depositions. Are you getting an answer, from one deponent that's different from the answers of other deponents? We have clients who use our technology on the fly, during depositions at trial, things like that. You know, for that kind of thing. So I think of it more, it's both efficiency, but it's also really, a super fast strategist helping you, like, get sense of what the story is and what the documents say really fast. And not just the documents, all the discovery materials, including depositions.
Katie, this question can sometimes come across as jaded, and it definitely is not meant to be. As somebody who
Yeah.
uses AI all the time in my practice.
It's okay. I hear jaded all
Say
the
it again?
time. I hear jaded all the time.
Well, like, I mean, I use it all the time, and everything you just described, if you're not using it for those purposes as a lawyer, like, you're wasting your time. You should be using that. But okay, the jaded part of my question is, like, I also, like, have a wall of books behind me. There is something very different to me about sitting with a book and reading that book rather than sitting with, like, an e-reader. Like, Te pro progress is
100%.
wonderful in so many ways, and I agree with all of the efficiencies and whatnot. What do you think we lose as practitioners, as people, whatever, when we deploy this incredible technology?
So, okay, I thought about this a lot because one of the things that I've worried about, both with technology and then work from home, are the younger lawyers, the younger associates. Like, I think about my early days at Kirkland and being in the office until 1 in the morning and talking. My, best times of my life were, like, talking through strategy or, coming up with a different way to think about something, that no one had thought about, or, um, you know, thinking about how to strategize, discovery, what you're asking for, how you're getting at the other side. And I really worry about, um, that being lost in sort of this modern age of technology plus work from home. Um, and I, on the other hand, know, that I would have been more creative and would have given better value faster if I had had the technology available to me, um, then that is available now, at least, with our technology. And and I think I don't know where the gap is between those two things, right? Um, there is a gap. Like there has to be a way for younger associates, younger lawyers to continue to be mentored in a way that, you know, the way I was mentored, and I don't know, Joe, what your history was, it it helped me develop my love of the law and love of litigation because I'm competitive. I like, finding loopholes. I like creative answers, and it made it really fun, to work with those other people. And I think we we have to be really intentional, especially in creative fields, like litigation, that we're not losing that experience. I also think there's a way for technology to help fill in some of those gaps. Um, and we talk about that a lot and think about that a lot here at Disco as to how do we solve for some of those problems, where a team is working together and how do we make it easier for them? How do we make it fun for them, technologically to interact, and, come up with ideas and feed off of each other's ideas. But but to be honest with you, I think it's more lost from work from home than technology. I don't know about you, but I'm like the old school. We we don't have an office here in Denver, but if I'm one of those people that if I would actually prefer to be in the office, but I get paid off of that. Yeah.
We had an attorney on recently, actually. Last guest that was he built a whole metaverse in his law firm so that people had avatars that could walk into each other's offices
Exactly.
into the
Yeah.
metaverse so that they can actually collaborate as if they were in person, which is fascinating.
Yeah. The irony too, though, is as law firms get bigger, one of their challenges is knowing what everyone's doing, right? I mean, because you think about it, like their intake forms don't give you a sense really as to what the cases are really about. They could search the document management systems. Hey, is somebody working on this issue that I'm working on? And that's what I used to do. Like if I had a case with kind of a unique issue, I would search the document management system to see if anyone else had litigated the same issue. But I think that's something technology could really help with in that kind of metaverse of knowing, okay, you know, we know that, um, Tim over in Dubai, even though I'd never have met him before ever in person, has litigated this a similar issue and could help, brainstorm on this case. And that's a challenge for law firms.
Katie, we always ask this at the end of our conversation, and that is what is your hottest take on the industry right now?
Okay, my hottest take or my hottest hope? My hottest hope my hottest hope is that we see deregulation happen in the next 5 years where, uh, we can have non-lawyer ownership of law firms in the US. I think you see innovation happening much more rapidly, and I think you're seeing ultimately client service better, in the UK, where they don't face those kinds of regulations anymore. And so I hope that we move away from that model. Uh, we'll see, but 5 years is my guess. I mean, obviously we're seeing it in certain states, but I mean at the you know ABA level. I'm hoping that we have far more material and meaningful conversations around that.
That is a good hot take. We have not had that
We
one
have
yet.
not.
That
Love it.
Good.
No, this is the totally new hot take. I love it. That is a good one. Whole new separate conversation we could have, even with private equity
Yep.
swallowing up some law firms. It's like, well,
Yeah.
is that similar to what's happening in the UK, or will it actually lead to innovation?
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, you have all sorts of, things happening in the UK and of course the accounting firms, which, there's pros and cons to that. But I just think, you know, that free market type concept applied to legal services will deliver better product for clients ultimately.
You heard it here first. Thank you to our audience for tuning into Between the Briefs, brought to you by Steno. A special thanks to our guest, Katie DeBord, for sharing her valuable insights on legal tech, corporate law, and the future of the legal industry. And of course, a big thank you to my co-host, Joe Stevens, for another fantastic conversation. Loved it.
Love this chat, Adrian, so much. This was wonderful. Thank you so much, Katie. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And stay tuned for more thought-provoking discussions at the intersection of law, technology, and innovation. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Up next on Between the Briefs.
The value of the lawyer is going to become enhanced in doing more of the thoughtful judgment type tasks and less of the routine, replaceable tasks that maybe were not really practicing law.
Stay tuned for the full interview coming to you soon. Between the Briefs is brought to you by Steno. To find out more about Steno and how we combine exceptional court reporting and litigation support services to deliver a superior litigation experience, visit steno.com. That's STENO.com. And then make sure to search for Between the Briefs in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts, and click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Steno, thanks for listening.